Hello and welcome to Sweet Spot DFS. This is a review of the 2020 CJ Cup, where Justin Thomas is your winner. That makes 2 of the last 3 years Justin Thomas has won at this tournament. It's a limited field. He obviously has good course history here. And I also think he might be a golfer, as long as he doesn't get injured. He might be the player of the year this year. I liked him at the end of last year. I thought he was going to be rolling through the tournament or the playoffs. I thought he'd win the playoff. He got really close. Rory ended up taking it down. But Justin Thomas's wrist injury from last year kind of plagued him throughout the entire major season. I think he's someone to be reckoned with this year. So I'm gonna probably play a lot of him, going forward. He looked sharp. He looked really good, and I got to watch a bunch of it this last week. If you guys didn't know, it being played over in Korea, I think they're like somewhere between 12 to 16 hours ahead of us. So, well, it's like 12 hours ahead of us. The coverage started at like 6 p.m. and pretty much ended at midnight. So as long as you're kind of a night person, you could have watched most of those golf tournaments. And like I said in the preview, the course looked great. Didn't look difficult, just people could or could not putt. So that was what it kind of came down to, which a lot of Bentgrass golf courses end up doing that. I know most golf courses do, but Bentgrass, if you have good Bentgrass stats, you typically do good or well. And you're going to see that looking into the spreadsheet, which I will pull up right now. I have the recent form tab up. Again, you guys can now see down here all the tabs I have open. So this is the 2020 recent form. Let's go ahead and just head over to the winning lineup and the optimal lineup. So the winning lineup used 49,700, which is really interesting because this was a limited event where there were only 70 some golfers in, so your pool was already pretty narrow. And having nearly the max salary, so he only left 300 on the table. Well, let me show you something first. So the $1 GPP winning lineup had 624.5 points. The optimal lineup had 671. And honestly, all of these golfers between 6th and 12th place, I shouldn't say all of them, most of them were between a point to 5 points. So even though the optimal lineup was the highest point total you could have gotten, you could have easily got 670.5, 670, 669.5, 669, because you could have interchanged a lot of those golfers as long as the salary allowed you to. So you really could have had any salary. Well, I shouldn't say any. There's obviously a limited amount of combinations you could have, but it was pretty open with a limited field. You had scoring bonuses with some of these golfers. Some of them didn't, but had high placement points. It really, all I'm getting at is there was room. There was room to take down the $1 GPP, and it could have been. So the $1 GPP, again, the winner had 49,700, or that's how much salary he used. I have him lighted, or his players shaded with the dark blue here. So he played Justin Thomas, Danny Lee, Hideki Matsuyama, Byung-Hun An, Wyndham Clark, and then 46th place Adam Schenk. I mean, you see it all the way down to 46. That's what first place won. That's kind of amazing. He won by 0.5 points, but he still won. And 64, he could have interchanged with any of these guys up here. 65, obviously, he could have went with Kiradek. 61, KJ Choi or Vegas at 64. He would have got more points that way, but it doesn't matter, right? He won, so he won. Optimal lineup had Justin Thomas, Danny Lee, not Hideki, Cameron Smith, Byung-Hun An, Kiradek Affibarnrat, and Kevin Streelman, which during the preview video, I think when I was going through players, I was like, oh man, Kevin Streelman's good enough to play. Sure enough, he finds himself in the optimal lineup, which he wasn't top 10, but 12th place, still pretty good. So very interesting. Again, this is the 3rd year, so we're still, tracking all the history, course history, recent form, last year finishes, last week finishes. Literally nobody played last week that found themselves inside the top 10. A bunch of last year finishes and a bunch of them in the top 20. So that's something to look at. I think if we went to 2019 recent form, it looks pretty identical. So you have a 40th place at 2nd in 2019. You have a 36th place at 1st. So that'll probably be a range I'll look at. 41st, you don't really see that until 10th place down where Adam Hadwin is. And of course, 2018 was the first year, so we weren't going to have those last year stats. But looking at this, very interesting. Recent form average, super interesting. I wouldn't say it mirrors last year's, but it was pretty close, minus the 2 guys that had really good recent form. Danny Lee came in with terrible recent form. But once we get to the DK page, you're going to see that he had pretty decent Bentgrass history. And I actually started him as a player that I liked. So I played him in one lineup, I think. Danny Lee, you can't trust him. But if you're, going over a process and Bentgrass ends up being, your identifier or whatever, you got to go with it. And I just chose not to. So here's the 2020 DK page. I didn't see anything with starting holes or tee times. So really, I didn't see anyone paired up with each other that would have, propelled each other. I even sorted it, which I guess I'll do. I sorted it by starting hole, tee time, scrolled through all of them. I didn't see a single pairing, like a threesome pairing, that had 2 guys, except for one. One group did, and I think it was like Ian Poulter, Graham McDowell, and KJ Choi. That was it. The only group that, paired up. And that was kind of my big strategy this week, was pairing up golfers that I thought would propel each other. I mean, I didn't really put a lot of Justin Thomas in my lineups because he was playing with Phil and Mark Leishman, and I just wasn't sure. I put a lot of, I think of the Justin Thomas lineups I created, I put a lot of Phil in there, and I recorded it over here. So JT, I didn't put Phil. I meant to say Mark Leishman, but I did put Mark Leishman, Phil, in 2 of them. So as you can see, I only played 4 lineups of Justin Thomas. I didn't play 5 lineups with Justin Thomas. There's a Mark Leishman. I actually really liked that lineup, but it didn't pan out well because Matthew Wolff just decided not to golf, or he just didn't like the Korean food. One of the 2. I don't know. So the tee times, pairing them up, not a big deal this week. Look at that. The world golf ranking, pretty remarkable. A bunch of guys in the top 100, inside the top 10, which I guess isn't so crazy. I guess we could expect that. My color coding scheme kind of worked. You see a lot more dark green than you see any other color, which is good. The dark green means, that's a category you want inside the top 10. And I think that was just golfers who finished top 20. Yeah, that makes sense. The year before. So a pretty good mix there. Let's go over the Bentgrass stats. I'm going to go ahead and hide all of this stuff because you guys are going to see that Bentgrass stats matter. Overall bent, you don't really see anything, too drastic. Danny Lee, 51 overall. 58 events, obviously. Danny Lee's been known as a streaky golfer, so I wouldn't have ever anticipated he'd have like phenomenal Bentgrass stats, but because of his streakiness, the fact that he can find himself in the top 10 17% of the time, that was kind of a big identifier for me, especially with 6,200 for his salary. He was definitely the best Bentgrass golfer at the bottom. If we go ahead and sort this by salary, highest to lowest, and come down here, 17% right there, Danny Lee. You really had nobody around him except for JB Holmes, really JB Holmes and Adam Schenk, which of course Schenk was in the $1 the $1 GPP. So that's I mean, not bad. The $1 GPP had these guys here at the bottom. Sorry, Adam Schenk, Wyndham Clark, and Danny Lee. No, I mean, for me, that's, if anyone was going by Bentgrass Stats, I think this guy probably did, and he probably created a bunch of lineups that way. I wouldn't be surprised if one of his lineups had JB in it instead of Wyndham, and then maybe Mean Wee Kim instead of Danny Lee. Like, no surprise to me that the guy with the $1 GPP, he could have actually just straight up looked directly for Bentgrass Stats, which would be awesome if he did. And if you're a listener, point it out. I'd love to hear that. It'd be awesome. I mean, to me, it's not like a super huge surprise. Like, I'm not giving you information you probably don't already know. Bentgrass, I mean, just grass stats in general matter to me. They're a big deal. But yeah, I mean, for that guy, his choices, no one had 0%. Kiradek, actually, he was in the optimal lineup, and he scored 100.5 points because I believe all 4 of his rounds were sub 70, so he got that bonus. Can't remember if he had any bogey-free rounds, but obviously he played well enough to get 100 points. I was surprised to see him in the top 10 because his Bentgrass is so terrible. I mean, he probably isn't a stranger to Korean golf. The fact that he's from Thailand, he's probably played, in the area or at least close by. So I don't know if really, environmentally or terrain wise that it would have been that much different than what he's used to. But yeah, it is surprising seeing Kiradek in the top 10 as well as on the optimal line. Maybe not so much optimal lineup. He gets points in bunches. So Jordan Spieth had the highest clip of finding the top 10 of everyone here. Everyone playing. Sorry. Didn't mean to do it that way. 42% found himself in the top 10. 40% for Hideki. Ended up finishing third. The rest of the guys not so well. Brooks, if you remember during the preview video, we talked about how he had knee surgery, and I didn't know that in the last tournament he played. He withdrew. I don't remember what for. Actually, I didn't even check. But the fact of the matter is he withdrew. I couldn't imagine it was his knee, or just maybe didn't feel well, wasn't playing well. It doesn't matter, but I can speculate all I want, right? But of course, you've got a bunch of 30th places here that have good Bentgrass. So obviously, you can point out. I don't care if you point out like, well, that's not an indicator that they're going to do well all the time. No, it's very true. But it's a good tell to get on certain players. Victor Hovland, if it wasn't for one bad round, and I can't remember if it was a hole in particular, but I didn't know this prior to this tournament, but he was honing in on the most rounds in the 60s. I think he set a PGA Tour record. So most consecutive rounds in the 60s is what his record that he set. And I'm not sure if it's within a certain time frame or if it's just period. But I mean, that's pretty impressive. And he had 3 rounds in the 60s. For this week, he just had a 74 or 75 his Saturday round. So, I mean, Victor Hovland looked good. I just wanted to point that out because I saw his name. But you can see all the golfers that I have starred. I mean, I'm not going to say all of them, did really well, but most of the ones I starred were because of their Bentgrass stats. And if we went to 2019, Bentgrass, 3rd, 1st, 20th, 3rd, 16th, 3rd, you get a bunch of golfers in the top 20. And majority of those were in the top 10 and top 5. Actually, it's just either top 5 or top 20. Which isn't a surprise to me, honestly. You know how I feel about the 4 events, 5 events. Like, I don't include them in the stats, especially when you see them go across right now. I haven't changed that since the preview video. So you won't see Victor Hovland or Colin Morikawa because they don't have enough Bentgrass events, in my opinion, under their belt for the stat to really matter that much. So if you actually remove them, your first, 6 golfers are going to be inside the top 20. And again, that doesn't shock me. It doesn't surprise me. So it's something to look for next year as well. And of course, we'll reference this video during the next year's preview. And here are all the swing stats. You had a bunch of guys in light green. That doesn't surprise me either. I don't think there's really a stat you could really pull from. I mean, because there's just not a lot of golfers here. So we're not seeing anything that's like jumping out like, oh, wow, we have a bottom end guy. Or I should say, we don't have like a bunch of light greens right here. I mean, you have a bunch of guys in the top 30, which that's a good enough tell, honestly. I don't know if they're in the optimal lineup, but still, or even if they did that well. Yeah, I can't go by that. Why did I think about that? Yeah. Okay. So going back to the results and thinking about the Bentgrass, other than Danny Lee, that 2019 Bentgrass was a big stat. Same with the top 20 overall as well. And then going over the stats, still same applies as I was just talking about. Approach, tee to green, off the tee, all of it looks like it mattered, but let's see. So if I went like this, I know I could freeze some frames and that's fine, but I just don't care to go over it right now. So if we highlight all those, come across, I had one guy with no stats, a bunch of people in the 30s here. So, I mean, it's kind of interesting to find the optimal lineup, of course. This is top 10, all of this down. Result for the tournament, and then their respective ranking for swing stats. So, I don't know. You can analyze it how you will. I, of course, don't really get too deep into this. It's good to see, and at least for next year, we'll have this whole spreadsheet that we can reference when it comes to trying to analyze next year's tournament. But with all of that, I'm going to end this video pretty close to the 20-minute mark that we typically get. But next week, I'm not sure what the format is. It's technically a skins tournament, but it's also a PGA sanctioned tournament, which makes no sense to me. Like, they wouldn't make to me, what this is going to be is more like a pro-am, where they have like 2 competitions in one. One is going to be just the best score for the tournament, so it's just going to be a typical stroke play, and then they're going to have side games obviously on the side, and that's where the skins part of it's going to come into play. So we'll see how it goes. I'm gonna watch a lot of the Golf Channel just to figure out what the heck this tournament is and how to analyze the spreadsheet. We're gonna have absolutely no course history, and just recent form to look at. That's about it. So next week's video probably gonna be short. I mean, I say that all the time, but I think it's gonna be short. But anyways, thank you for watching. Hit a like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff, and I will see you next week. All right, thanks. Bye.